Counterfeit products may seem attractive with their lower prices, but there are many hidden dangers that users may not be aware of. Counterfeiters are able to sell their product at lower prices as they do not invest in the costly research and design testing that reputable manufacturers do. In addition, to reduce costs further, often cheaper, inferior materials are used. As a result, the use of counterfeit products can have serious consequences, and not just on the life of the turbocharger and your engine. At Cummins Turbo Technologies, the safety of our customers is paramount. All genuine whole-set turbochargers undergo rigorous testing and development to ensure they meet stringent performance and safety standards. We have specialist research and development teams who determine the exact material specifications to ensure a durable, reliable, and safe product. This film shows a standard safety test at Cummins Turbo Technologies, where a genuine whole-set turbocharger is tested to destruction to ensure safety standards are met. As you can see, the whole-set turbocharger is specifically designed so that in the event of a failure, all parts remain contained within its housing, thus preventing any safety hazards from occurring. This film shows what happened when we put counterfeit turbochargers under the exact same rigorous approval testing that all genuine whole-set turbochargers undergo. Imagine what the consequences would be if the counterfeit turbocharger was on a truck or a bus when it exploded. The debris from the turbocharger can move faster than a speeding bullet. Using a counterfeit turbocharger is like using a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. All whole-set turbochargers undergo rigorous testing and development to ensure they meet stringent performance and safety standards. Do not put yourself and your customers at risk. Insist on genuine. Look carefully at the data plate and on the casting to ensure that it is a genuine whole-set turbocharger. If it doesn't say whole-set, then it isn't whole-set. Buy genuine whole-set product.
Or if they misspell it.
Yeah, it'll say like Hoyset.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when they screw things up like that. Now,
Hoyset lowercase.
Yeah, there's Wholeset actually sends out material with how their anti-counterfeit measures and what they do. You know, sometimes it's the way their data plates put on, how the lettering is, what stand. They give you ideas. So if you got something that doesn't match that, it's a good reason to believe it might be a counterfeit. And big engine parts like that are big-time counterfeit targets. Mack, and it's not just Cummins, it's Detroit, Mack, Volvo, Mercedes. All the big engine guys they're always suffering with, counterfeit parts coming back to the factory and warranty claims. They're like, we can't warranty this; it's not even our part. So you got to be aware. All right, so when we do. I was going to say when we do counterfeit an engine, when we do turbocharge an engine, okay, hopefully we're not into that Gucci valve cover. The biggest problem, not the biggest problem, but one of the things we have to deal with after we turbocharge the air-going engine, we got to cool it. So, like I mentioned earlier, there's two ways that we can do it. There's the intercooler, which uses engine coolant, antifreeze, to run through the cooler, and then we put hot air across the liquid-cooled cooler, and it comes out the bottom into the engine as cooler air. And a lot of your Detroit two-strokes would do that. And some earlier Cummins did that. Okay, nothing wrong with it. It's very efficient. It's just you got to add additional cooling lines, clamps, and if this thing starts to leak internally, it's going to leak right down into your cylinders. Okay, that presents a whole other host of problems. The more acceptable method, at least in transit, is a charged air cooler. It's a radiator for air. So I run cool air from outside across the grill here, and I've got the hot air from the turbocharger entering here and exiting into the engine. Now, one of the easiest ways to tell me if my charged air cooler is working correctly is simply take a temperature drop. Get the engine at operating speed. You can't just walk out there one cold day, fire it up, let it warm up, and then take it. You won't see one because the engine, the air is not being turboed. It's not being boosted because you're not. You know, the engine. You don't. The turbo doesn't supply boosted idle. So if I just go out there and I want to see if my charged air cooler is working and fire it up, and I take my little temperature gun, I'm like, ooh, it's 72 degrees and 72 degrees. Oh, it's bad. It's not working. No, you're not doing it right. Okay, the best way to do it is go out, get the vehicle up to a road operating temperature, come back to the yard, and actually have someone do a stall test on the engine. And while it's under load, you're looking for a temp drop, and it should be around 50 degrees, somewhere in there. You should see a big temperature drop. If I see, 108, 107, no bueno. And usually what happens is this gets obstructed because they replaced the turbo for some reason, and all the oil that the turbo leaked or spewed built up in here, clogged it up, and now you got an airflow issue. So you're starting the engine for air and it's not cooling. Now, this is a stationary setup. I just thought it was kind of cool. But aftercooler can reduce the operating temperature to about 110 degrees before the air enters the engine. Okay, so it comes out of the turbo about 275, 375, should enter the engine around 100. Okay, around 100. Now, let me ask you this real quick before we transition into the fuel system. The air cleaner. Can you over-service an air cleaner? Yeah. What works better? A brand new air cleaner or an air cleaner that's been in service for a little while?
It's been in service.
Been in service a little while. Okay, that's why we finally moved off of, and Mike, you can back me up on this if I'm right, we've moved off of changing the air cleaner every year to now you have to take a manometer reading. Okay, you have to measure the restriction.
Try telling that to RTA.
What's that?
Try telling that to RTA, they change those everything.
So
all the time.
can you explain why that is true?
I can, but I don't feel like it. No, so, you didn't see that?
I know that
did you? A brand new air filter is only using the paper element to filter the air coming in, right? For a period of time, as that filter collects dirt, that dirt also helps filter dirt. Now, it's that transitional point when the dirt becomes not a benefit, but an obstruction that it's time to change it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how did we used to check air filters?
Pull them out, look at them, it's wrong.
Okay, how did we used to clean the air filter?
Bang them out on the floor, blow
Yeah,
them out there.
okay.
Yeah.
So you've all done it the wrong way for many a year. And you know what? When I started in transit, that's how I was taught to clean the air filter.
Yeah.
Oh, and then if I wanted to get it really clean, I'd take shop air and blow through it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And rip
You
the
get
paper.
damage, yeah.
Yes. So that's not how we service air filters. And of course, there was the one time I put it in backwards.
But they don't fit.
Yeah, they do. Takes a little work, but they'll go in there.
History will
Why
remember.
is this so difficult?
Well, yes, in no uncertain terms, that's kind of what I was saying. But then when I got it in and bolted up, I'm like, yeah, baby. Then I go to start it. White smoke.
Oh.
Why is it not starting? Well, because I've choked off all the airflow.
Yeah, you blocked it off.
Yeah.
Like,
It was a bitch and no start. It really was.
Is there really, is a K&N filter a better filter, or, I'm just curious because.
No, you know. Boy, that's kind of a loaded question.
Some guys say that they're not, that the actual, just the paper,
I'm thinking when it comes to push and shove, you're still pushing air across your paper element, right?
yeah.
Now, what's so special about K&N's paper that Donaldson, for instance, isn't doing?
Well, some of the little newspaper.
It's a gauze
It's a gauze or a
With-
mesh.
with oil.
Yeah.
It's like mesh on both sides.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be running an oil air cleaner now because that's gonna get picked up into the intake.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
It has to be done right. That's
Yeah.
the thing that most people
the
don't do.
thing that makes the K&N, I think, better, it's not so much the filter, but it's the aftermarket plumbing in the kit and the way they house the filter in the airflow.
Oh, for cold air.
Yeah, because I don't think it's the filter, it's the fact that most of those K&N kits are what they call cold air induction kits. Where back in the day, in your ranchero, your hood scoop stops about this far from the air cleaner and it's under the hood with all the other hot air in the engine,
That's an intro.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if I take a snorkel and I put it somewhere where I can draw cooler, more dense air into the engine, I'm gonna pick up performance right there.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So whether it's their air filter that's really giving you the boost in performance, or the fact that you get a bitchin' air filter plus they've got a cold air induction kit. What's making the boost and improvement? The cold air or the filter?
Yeah.
One has to wonder. Is
You
it a
also
good is it a
clean it
good
up.
deal? Yeah, I mean I've got no problems with it, but I don't think it's the air filter itself.
It's $50 for a drop-in one, but the thing is that another benefit people call out on it is that it's washable, reusable.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
other
washable.
thing. You can clean it, and that would be a benefit.
In a way, if you do it right.
If you can clean it to the point where it acts like a new air filter.
Well, because you gotta rinse it lightly from the back.
Yeah.
Well, first you spray
So,
with hairspray and then rinse it.
I'm all about the cold air induction kit.
Oh, yeah, yeah, cold air, and yeah, I didn't realize, yeah, that.
Most of them come that way. You could buy the drop-in, the round one that would fit in your snorkel. But most of them, they'll come with
I have
a
a little fan. I put it on.
boot that goes over your carburetor, and then there'll be a snorkel that'll go to a canister down here, and then there'll be an inlet coming right off the road.
Oh, yeah, that's a smart, yeah.
Do it right.
Yeah, so you get a little ram effect,
Oil.
and you get a cold air.
Yeah, yeah.
Because your underhood air
So it pushes
It's,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It-
versus outside air,
Dries it out.
Mike always runs better when it's colder,
Yeah.
for sure.
so
More-
that would benefit.
Yeah.
Next
Wouldn't
one
the
is-
water from washing it, wouldn't it affect it?
No, because the quantity is so small, and by the time it made itself through the carburetor, got into the worm intake, it just vaporized,
Oh, okay.
I would think. Okay, now, the air intake, the turbocharger, and they mentioned it in the video about the twin entry pulse fed turbocharger. Because we use an exhaust manifold that is not a constant flow, it's pulse, because every time an exhaust valve opens, it pressurizes the manifold, and the pressure drops a little bit, then the next exhaust valve opens and it pressurizes the manifold. So you have a pulsing system of air coming out of that manifold, whereas with the twin entry turbo, it divides the pulses to allow a more constant supply of air to turn the turbine at a relatively constant RPM instead of a jerky pulsing RPM. That's what this twin entry does. Dampens the exhaust pressures and smooths out the flow, making it spin more consistently. Yes.
When the turbocharger is getting that exhaust, right, to make it spin, what happens if one of those blades, like, is cracked or something?
The whole thing's gonna come apart. It's gonna come apart.
Vibration.
It's gonna be ugly.
Have you seen one?
I've seen some after a race that have come apart. I've seen root blowers literally destroy themselves and lift themselves up off the motor.
That's like, well, that's a fucking one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they fail.
Have you seen the Cummins video where the whole upper half of the block blows off? and
Yeah,
dumps
I
off?
had a video on that. Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Now, going back to air filters and the air inlets in that system. How do I check the filter if I don't want to take it out of the housing? Because there's several things that goes wrong with that, and I've done them all. Okay.
How you learn
Like, I
the
have experience.
What's that?
You never forget it that way.
No, you don't. So you take the air cleaner cover off, right? You set it down. If you're having a bad day, you'll strip a couple of bolts. Take the air cleaner out. You drop it on the ground a couple times, kick it around, blow some air over it, right? You've dented it, right? Then you put it back in the housing. You didn't wipe out the housing, so all that dirt that's in the housing, you just pushed into the engine, okay? And then because you're lazy, you don't get a new gasket. You put the old gasket up there in about 3 different pieces, and then you run it down with your air gun to whatever it happens to stop at. Okay. Now I've got all this dirt that I pushed from the housing into the engine, so there goes any benefit for the air filter. I didn't put a new gasket on, so now I got unfiltered air making its way past the air filter into the engine. I probably ripped the paper with that 120 pounds of shop air. I blew through it. And if I didn't, by dropping it on the ground from elevated, I probably dented it, the housing, so now it doesn't seal. But I'm good to go. And there's a much easier way of doing that. How do we do it? What's the easy way?
Get a new one.
What's that? Get a new one. No, actually, I don't want to do that. Because if my air filter is filtering more efficiently because it's using the initial layer of dirt on the filter to help, why do I want to change that?
Yeah, it's doing the best it can do.
Yeah, I mean, that's like taking it out in its prime of life.
Well, if you're gonna check the air filter, I mean, usually you can inspect it, and if there should be some telltale signs. Because
I don't want to inspect it. I can't see squat to begin with. If I look at an air filter in sunlight and it goes through my glasses, it's going to catch fire.
Take out a bum
Nope.
and then put your mouth over it. That's
Yeah,
fire.
you do that. No wonder your burritos taste funny. Wow. That might though, on my part, that might make my cooking taste better. I don't know.
what is it?
Well, what do you put in this? Well, this, that, and a little bit of 20W40 grit. How about if I just measure how much effort it takes to pull the air through the filter?
Well, that's good.
That sounds good?
Yeah.
I thought so. So I'm going to use any feminists in the room? Manometer. You see, because it doesn't work if I call it a personal meter. It just kind of loses the pizzazz. Besides, if I ask Jeff in a drunken stupor, hey Jeff, go get me a personal meter, I got to check he's going to really have another one. Now they make the electronic version. Looks like a calculator, you hold it, and it measures in inches of water. Now, if this thing were correct, you would see water in this tube. Okay, and it would equal half would be over here, and half would be over here.
It's a U-turn at the bottom, right?
Well, it's the OG YouTube,
Yeah.
right? It was YouTube before YouTube was YouTube.
Yeah.
All right, so and if I put a vacuum on here, it would displace water. It would pull some up this way, and it would have some go down that way. Okay, so if it goes up 2 inches and down 2 inches, that's a total of 4 inches of water. I've moved the water column 4 inches, 2 up, 2 down. Right? Now someone will be like, well, what if it goes up 1 and down 3? Not on this planet. If it's doing that, you are smoking some good stuff, Maynard. Okay? Or you just can't see for some. Okay? Now, the advantage of this, like Jeff was saying, is most air filters somewhere will have a plug. Ours have them. They got that wonderful filter minder. It's a little air filter restriction gauge. It's all plastic.
Don't lie.
It's the best restriction gauge Chinese prison labor can build.
Yeah, there you go.
Do I have any Chinese prisoners in here? All right, good. Yeah. Sorry to hear about that. Actually, I need you to leave because you've probably got the beer virus. You got the Bud Light virus. What, Corona, really? So if I get the coronavirus, do I get a lime with that? Salt, maybe? Just saying.
You can have whatever the hell you want, just stay the hell away from me.
Yeah, right, exactly. Probably gonna die anyway, right? So, now there's 2 ways I can check my air system. I can check the air filter, usually right at the back of the filter with that. I like those filter minders. I like that we have them. Why? Because it gives me something to unscrew to plumb this to and check it with.
Yep.
I don't have to make something. Now,
They did that on accident, the filter wires. They didn't make it for that.
well, no, they made it.
They tried.
They tried. The problem with that is that little spring sits there, and all it does is get hot and cold and hot and cold. You know how you make a spring less springy? Warm it up and cool it down. There's no way of calibrating that spring. It just sits there. Does nothing. Kind of like your cousin sitting on the couch. Hey, if you're going by the fridge, how about getting me a beer? Really? Just because you said that, no, I'm not going by the fridge.
Mine's doing that right now.
Yeah? All right. So I can check my air filter by looking right at the back of the filter. And that's hunky-dory. Or I can check the entire air inlet system by simply plugging my manometer right here and looking at the total restriction that it takes to get from the air filter, through the charged air cooler, through all the hoses, through all the plumbing, and finally into the engine. Would that be a valuable tool?
Yes.
Absolutely, because if I check my air filter and it's not restricted, but I've got a restriction between my air filter and here, it's somewhere in the plumbing, the charged air cooler. Okay? Or I got loose hose clamps. So all that pressure from the turbo that should be going in the engine is going out the hoses to atmosphere because the clamps aren't tight.
It's an easy fix.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen engines come in running horribly bad, and all the guy does is tighten all the hose clamps.
Back.
You know, and then he's like, wow, that made a world of difference. You know, the air that's supposed to be there is actually there.
We had a Detroit 60 that came in for low power, and everyone checked all kinds of shit. They even checked the injectors, the heights, they checked all kinds of, and they never checked the air filter.
Yeah.
It wasn't loaded. It was packed with dirt.
Yeah.
Wow.
For good fun.
Now-
About to run it on the dyno.
They're overthinking it.
Yeah.
So you can see by what we've talked about so far the importance of this air inlet system. It does a fair amount of work. Okay. All right. Now, manometer.
Oh, my.
Oh crap. MANO METER. Yeah. Now, that's really cumbersome to use, that manometer. Okay, that's very cumbersome to use. So what I normally would use,
Look it up. I got a couple.
I had a digital. They have a special one too that does pressure and back. I mean, that does pressure back. They have a gauge that does it.
You know,
Maggie
say,
says-
yeah.
Yeah, it's a waste. It's a waste of money. Well, maybe not. Because.
And even this is a bit cumbersome, but
Oh, maybe they're working a deal with some of the filter guys.
Don't get paid.
Yeah, there's something that's a little fishy.
Oh, man, oh, yeah.
Okay. you can get
There it is, yep. I can hear
you
it.
can get manometer gauges that read just like the YouTube. So this one is inches of mercury, so I can measure higher pressures because it takes more effort to move mercury. And they don't like to have mercury in a YouTube because, well, if you spill it,
That's it.
there it goes. Which I have a mercury manometer, by the way. I've hidden it well. And I've got one that measures in inches of water. So if I wanted to measure my air inlet restriction, I would just take the tube from the back of this, put it in the fitting behind my air filter where the wonderful charged air cooler or charged air filter liner is, throttle up the engine, load it up, and then read the gauge. So you have to do it the way the manufacturer wants. Put the engine under load, so you could drive it up a hill and read it, or you could do a stall test. And they'll give you a specification. You know, 6 inches of water, or for a new filter, no more than 15 inches of water. For a, and they say this in the book, which slays me, for a dirty air filter, one that's been in service, no more than 26 inches of water. So if I want to see if I need to change my air filter, I hook the hose up, I have one of you guys do a stall, and I read the gauge. Oh, it's been in there a while, and I'm reading 12 inches of water. We're good. Okay, filter's been checked. That's all you need to do.
Does it come and use it for crankcase blow-by too? Because you can check pressure with it as well, right? Light pressure.
Oh yeah, you can use a manometer for all kinds of amazing things,
Fun stuff.
fun stuff. Okay. So I had this box custom built. So I got all my fittings in the back.
That's really cool.
That's cool, huh?
That.
You made it?
Oh no, I don't have the skill set to make this. No, our machine shop made it. Pretty neat. I just came up with the idea. The guy said, "Oh, yeah, I got some scrap stuff. I can make that." Come on.
You made that out of scrap stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I mean that's
Not bad.
that's stainless for they use. They got sheets of that in the machine shop for various projects, so he probably had a half a sheet laying around. Yeah. Now, we're gonna talk a little bit about our fuel system here, our CNG fuel system. Okay. Now, we already talked about ignition timing, ejection timing, you know, advanced and retarded. I know it's in print, oh my God. Is anybody triggered? He wrote retarded. Retarded basically, and in all seriousness, just simply means delayed. So if I delay my spark, the piston's higher in the bore. If I advance my spark, the piston's lower in the bore. And we do this for various reasons. The engine speed changes in RPM, and I have the engine spinning faster and less time for my flame front to establish itself. I'll turn the spark plug on sooner. I'll advance the timing. If I turn it on too soon and the fuel lights off too early and the pressure wave comes down the bore and strikes the piston on the way up, I'll simply delay lighting off the spark plug. I'll retard the timing to correct that.
Knock.
Knock.
Is what you're describing.
Pre-ignition, pinging, knocking, dieseling, running on.
With advanced though, is advanced the most, if it's farthest, you can get it as advanced acceptable, is that the most desired?
Depending. If I'm running the RPM up, the revolutions per minute is going faster and faster and faster. So I have a shorter amount of time for the air fuel to mix, the spark plug to ignite, the flame front to establish itself, and finally light off the fuel air mixture. Then I have to light the spark plug sooner for all that to happen. So as your engine RPM increases, your computer will advance the timing on the ignition system to light off the spark plug. That answer that?
Yeah, so usually you want it, for more performance, advancing it as much as you can is better usually. Not on a diesel, right?
There's an optimum time that you want to light the spark plug off, right?
Yeah.
Where the piston is in the bore for that to happen depends on how fast the engine's turning. So if I'm idling, then I might only I'll light it off 12 degrees before top dead center, right?
Yeah.
If I'm wide open throttle full load, I might be lighting it off 19, 20 degrees before top dead center, because I need that additional time for all that, all that mixing and lighting and starting the fire and everything to occur before the piston gets to the top.
Yeah.
But because it's traveling much faster, I got to light it off much sooner.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the RPM and where the piston is in the bore. So the timing for a natural gas engine would be different than the timing for a gasoline engine, because gasoline isn't as hard to ignite as CNG. So you'd have to have a different timing curve programmed into the engine to do that. Make sense?
Yeah.
That was the problem with the old convert your car to run on propane days. Remember?
Yeah.
Gomer would throw a propane tank in the back of his truck and just rejet his carbonator a little bit and run off propane, only his timing wasn't set for propane, it was set for gasoline. Thing ran like shit all the time. So when you're broke down on the side of the road, you break out your little hibachi, at least you got gas to barbecue by while you're waiting for the tow truck. You know, Billy Bob, he's always hacking away at some squirrels somewhere, right? Okay. That just rolled out. That just came out. That was pretty good.
This guy was on the radio saying that he could run his car with salt water.
I heard something about that as well, and what that is probably a fuel cell.
Brown's gas? It's that HHO, like hydrogen on demand stuff?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm too old to keep up with that crap.
They're just making hydrogen from water and then burning the hydrogen.
Yeah, they got a flashlight out on the market. You put water in it, it'll work. It's just a hydrogen fuel cell is all it is.
Yeah, no mini cell.
Yeah, a little mini cell. So, I can just see it now. Some schmuck goes to the beach and pours a bunch of salt water in his freaking gas tank.
Let's go!
I know, that'd be surf's up, brah. Alright, here. Light off that Maui Wowie, man, and you're gonna be flying. Alright, let's talk about compressed natural gas here.
Watching a blank TV.
So that snow, man. June, brother, what are you watching? Snow Channel. Oh, that's static, man. Your antenna got unhooked. Been there, done that. It's amazing what alcohol will do for you. Alright, CNG as a fuel sucks. Low BTUs. The less heat, the less pressure on the piston. Why do we run it? Emissions. Plain and simple. That's what it's all about. Odorless, colorless, tasteless. Sounds like my cooking. Non-poisonous, that's not my cooking. Okay? Mercaptan, I didn't know smoking devices, your smoke detectors were not timing devices for the meatloaf. I thought, cool. Smoke detectors just happen to go off at the same time my meatloaf's done. How bitchin' is that? So that rotten egg smell is added to the fuel. It's not a natural occurrence. The fuel, when you pull it out of the ground, is absolutely, you can't tell it's there. The rotten egg smell is put there so we can tell leaks. Or blame somebody for eating a Taco Bell. Okay? We've talked about British thermal units. The amount of heat necessary to raise a pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. Fuel has heat. The higher the heat value of the fuel, the more torque you're going to get out of the engine. Okay? So for example, diesel fuel, 144,000 BTUs. Gasoline, 135. Natural gas, I've seen it as low as 75K. Okay? Great for cooking, horrible for running your bus. Okay? Octane refers to stability. Now everybody used to think octane is like, oh, that's how it lights off. No. It refers to how much I can squeeze and heat the fuel before it self-ignites. Now my old hot rod guys are like, oh, you gotta run a high octane in my key barrel because if you don't, that's how I get performance out of it. Fuel burns better. No, you gotta run high octane in your key barrel because you jack the compression ratio up, and if you run the cheap shit, the fuel's not stable and it knocks and pings. Right? You went from 9.5 to 1 to 17 to 1 in your key barrel. So you can't run the cheap shit. You got to run something that's a little bit more stable. It lights off better. It all lights the same, man. I can put 89 octane in your house and it'll burn down, and I'll put 91 octane in your house and it'll burn down. It all burns the same. Now I'm going to get a call. Mike's threatening to be an arsonist. Just because I sit there and stare at a match for hours doesn't mean I like fire. I used to use a lighter, but I burned my hands on the hot metal part. You ever put a lighter in a compactor? That's fun.
Someone might have gone at the right angle.
I just did that. Yeah. What the hell? Actually, we put one in a press and machine shop.
Yes.
Actually, I did. Because I wanted to see what happened.
Arsonist.
Huh?
Nothing.
That's right.
Curiosity will get you in trouble sometimes.
Okay. All right, natural gas. Problem with natural gas is it'll displace the oxygen in the air and you suffocate. You don't die from poisoning. You'll be a nice corpse. You'll be all prim and proper. So if you're working in a bus, and this happens usually in cold weather, you're out here on the front of the shop, you got the windows closed, you got the doors closed, you got the bus running, and you're working on a problem. And now maybe the problem's related to the fuel system or not, you don't know, and all of a sudden you start feeling nauseous, dizzy, confusion, lack of coordination, and you didn't steal my lunch. What you're suffering is oxygen deprivation to the brain. Some people that's a plus. Most people that's not. Okay, you need to get out of that environment. Open the doors, get out of the bus, open the windows, and find out where the gas is coming from, because now you have a second problem. I know why you're smiling. You're thinking, the dude ate 9 Doritos Supremes. Okay, he's the one that's got to get out of the bus. That shit will kill you. All right, so we're going to talk about these components here. Connector, PRD, CNG fuel box, all these fun items make up your CNG fuel system. So here's one thing you need to take away from today's class regarding the fuel system on this bus. Never work on a charged system. Never work on a CNG system that is under pressure. Hey, I got any veterans in here? Back in the day when we were in boot camp and we had to get all our inoculations, you walked the gauntlet. You had Navy corpsmen on each side and they had these little air guns. They'd and they'd get your inoculations, you'd reach the end of the line, pass out, fall down, they'd drag you off to a field. Okay. They were using air pressure to inject the inoculation into your bloodstream. I prefer the needle, but nonetheless. So if I can put inoculations into a bloodstream using air, I can certainly put fuel into your bloodstream using air. So that's why you don't ever work on a charged system. Now, our system is broken down into 3 zones. Fortunately, they did that so I don't have to dump the fuel tanks every time I need to work on the fuel system. Okay. So zone 1, I'll just show you the picture. Oh, I guess I don't have pictures. Oh, damn it. Zone 1 is if you open up the fuel door, you've got a quarter turn valve. Everything below that quarter turn valve is zone 1. So when my mechanics have to change the filters in there, they close that valve and they run the engine out of fuel. Now it's depressurized. Now they can change fuel filters, they can work on the fuel system inside the engine bay. Okay? It's the regulator, it's the fill ports, it's the gauges, it's all of that. Zone 2 is plumbing. It's everything above that quarter turn valve to the solenoid valve on the tank. Zone 2. Okay. Zone 3 is the tank, the pressure relief devices, and the solenoid valve. That I have to drain everything. Unless I'm that schmuck from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, who took the solenoid valve out of a charged tank and it killed him. Launched him 30 yards down the road. Why did he do that? Because his buddy said the tank was empty. Nice. So the second point, number 2. Always verify that the system is either depressurized or drained. Not that I don't like you, but if you tell me the system's depressurized, and I assume you know what you're doing, and you don't pay the price, I do. So I'm going to check. Now, if that bothers you, that if you become triggered, guess what, Sporto? I don't care. Because I get to go home that day. You know what I mean? And we have some, in Long Beach, we had some,
Why, you checking? You don't trust me?
oh, what, would I marry you overnight or something? What's the deal here? Of course I don't trust you. I just like to go home in one piece. Okay? Now, there's my tanks. I like this. The outer layer is sacrificial to protect minor abrasions and acid attack. Acid attack. Yeah, you're thinking the same thing, aren't you? The chick was on LSD and she had a fit. Okay?
See that.
Anodized aluminum bosses at each end to thread in plugs, fittings, and valves. And then we have damage-absorbing material at each end of the dome on the tank. Okay? So these tanks are designed to work at about 3,600 pounds. They got about a 5,000 pound rating. I have an emergency relief device, pressure relief device. It's actually thermally activated. So if my tanks catch fire, this little ring in here melts, the spring opens, and I dump the tanks. Or I dump the tank that is plumbed to. So here's the rub. Just because you see fuel coming out of the vent line doesn't mean all 6, 7, or 8 tanks are venting. That may not be the case. If you have one that fails and it vents, don't assume the whole system is depressurized. That will get you in trouble.
Maybe just that tank.
Just that tank, or 2 tanks, depending. But and you said the right word. You said maybe. Okay. So how do I know if my whole system's depressurized? I go down and I look at the gauge. You open up the fuel door, there's gauges there. They got pressure in them, it's got pressure in the system. Okay? If there's 0 pressure in it, how do I verify that the gauges are working? Go start the bus. If it runs, it's like, call the Enquirer, I'm running with no fuel. I think I've invented something here. No, probably not. Your gauges don't work. But hey, they're coming anyway. I'm a man. I'll just tell them I'm pregnant. Just saying. And I don't know who the daddy is. Sorry. It's been one of those days. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. My dogs, if you're wondering what happened to my face, my dogs decided to have a scrum while I was playing with them. And then the claws came out and I didn't get my face out of the way in time. It was actually kind of cool. They're like, oh, oh, oh. And of course, I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier sometimes. I thought they were just playing with each other. What I didn't see was the food on the floor. They were going for the food and my face got in the way. Looked great, because then I had my big dog with blood on her white fur. I should have got a picture of that.
Wow.
My wife's like, she's tasted human blood. You gotta watch her now. I'm like, oh, stop. was watching too much Cujo. That was cool though. Frank's like, what happened to your face? I'm like, really? Been this ugly for a while. Now, solenoid valve. This is zone 3. If I've got to pull this valve out of the tank, I've got to depressurize all of the tanks. Now the depressurizing class I'm not going to get into today because that's like 3 hours. It's a specific procedure. And it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Okay. So that is controlled by the Cummins module that tells it when to open and allow fuel into the system. Okay, it rides in the tank. And it's got tank pressure sitting behind it. Okay. When the appropriate conditions have been met, either the multiplexing system or Cummins control module will energize the solenoid, open that bad bear up, and we're flowing fuel. Okay. So today's starting procedure are 2 separate steps when you look at multiplexing. 1, you got to crank the engine over, so you have to meet certain criteria. And 2, you've got to turn on the fuel system and the ignition system and allow it to run. 2 separate steps. So I can have a crank and no start, or a no crank, no start. For you operators on the road, when the thing dies, that's an important thing to tell Joaquin over there. Because if he knows it's a crank but no start, he's got one set of problems in his brain housing group. Whereas if it's a no crank, no start, there's a whole other separate items that it could be. Right? There is the solenoid that's inside the valve. So what I did was I cut this bad guy in half, and this is what it looks like. That's not the greatest picture. I think I got a better one. There you go. When I energize the solenoid, this little valve moves down and allows fuel to flow out of the valve. Okay. Now, what we have here is a manual lockdown tool. This comes in the valve, as you see it. When I buy a valve from parts, and I open up the little box, and I eagerly unwrap it, right there on top of it is the built-in manual lockdown tool. And what that does for me, when I turn it down, it mechanically blocks this passage. So no matter what happens here, energized or not, there's no fuel coming out of this bad valve. I take my little Allen wrench, I turn it down, it blocks the pass, that tank is mechanically closed. And when you're working on the fuel system, okay, especially zone 2, zone 1 not so much, but zone 2, you got to lock those tanks down with that. Yeah.
How long do one of those Lincoln tanks stay in service for?
I think we're 20 years. 20 years from the date it's put into service. Used to be 10 when they first started making them. And they weren't composite. They were the old, they looked like freaking scuba tanks. They were some heavy duty dudes, man. Those things weighed some pounds. So
They overdid it.
well, no, I just don't think the technology was there to make a composite tank with enough structural strength to contain 5,000 pounds. Okay, because they've been making CNG tanks for, a number of years now.
You seen all the downside for CNGs because those tanks are really expensive?
Well, I'm sorry, I totally missed that. Say that again?
Isn't it the downside of CNG because those tanks are
Yeah.
really expensive?
Yeah, they're about, well, when I started, they're about $5,000 a pop. They're up to about $6,500 times, what, 7 tanks? So you got about $55,000 worth of fuel tanks. That's a lot of fuel tank. Now, I also have a tool, yes,
So if they know that diesel's better now, how come they don't go back to diesel?
politics. It's all about politics.
Yeah.
Because of the whole
That's-
emission stuff.
Huh?
Because of the whole emission stuff.
Well, the diesels, the new diesels are
Cleaner, but.
they are certified ultra low emissions, ULEV, ultra low emission vehicle. Well, that's what these are, ULEVs. The diesels with the cleaned up diesel fuel they're running nowadays are much cleaner than these
These?
buses. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's just the word diesel.
Yeah. It's all about politics. Yes.
Has there been any, accidents or situations with mechanics dealing with the CNG and LNG? Cause I heard of,
Yes,
mechanic,
there's been a few.
fire starting when he had his cell phone on, worked on, and he caught fire and all.
Well,
That was a long time ago.
first off,
He had to retire.
I don't think it was a cell phone, number
Oh,
one.
oh, good, that's good.
That's an urban legend. Theoretically, a cell phone could technically start a fire.
Yeah,
Because every cell phone these days has a vibrate mode, right?
yeah,
And the little motor that causes your phone to vibrate is not explosion proof proved for it to be operated in a hazardous environment. However, that little motor draws 0.06 milliamps of current to operate, right? Very, very small amounts of current. And it's in a case that's sealed up pretty good because the cell phone guys don't want water to get in there.
yeah.
Okay, so to have a cell phone be blamed for a fire, that's a stretch. Can it happen? On paper, sure. Will it? I seriously doubt it. If you ever watch Mythbusters, they tried that.
Oh, yeah.
They took a glass room, filled it full of a vaporous, very hazardous, very flammable vapor, and they put a cell phone in it, and they called it, and vibrated, vibrated, vibrated. Nothing. When my dad was working for the phone company, he's like, that's a myth. Okay, that's a myth.
What
But,
about this igniting gas at the pump?
oh, sure, that can have
Static,
oh,
static,
absolutely.
that's-
I've got a video of a young lady that pulls into a gas station wearing one of the fuzzy sweaters, right? She got leather seats. She puts the nozzle in her Jeep. She slides back in her Jeep, starts yakking on the phone, puts the phone down, slides back out. Now she's changed her electrical stat. She is now charged.